Welcome to Sleepy History. Tonight we delve into the depths of Greek mythology, a universe of shadows, mysteries, and eternal sleep. Forget the rush of the day and the noises of the outside world. It's time to descend into the underworld, not to fear it, but to understand it. Close your eyes, get comfortable, and let my voice guide you on this journey. For the ancient Greeks, death was not an end, but a transition, an inevitable journey to the realm of Hades. Their vision was not marked by the idea of a fiery hell, but by a mixture of fear and fascination. They feared death because it meant losing the sunlight, the company of the living, and the memory of their exploits. They believed that the souls of the dead became shadows, beings without strength or clear memory, wandering through a gray and melancholic place. Let's imagine the mind of a Greek warrior. Their greatest honor was to be remembered, to have their name echo in songs and poems. Death in battle was not as fearful as oblivion. The underworld, Hades, was a place where this oblivion became tangible, a site where individuality dissolved into a mass of purposeless souls. Yet it also held a certain fascination. The idea of a hidden world beneath the earth, ruled by a stern but just God, stirred the imagination. The Greeks conceived of the underworld as an inverted reflection of the world of the living, with its own rivers, judges, and unbreakable laws. It was as real in their minds as the summit of Mount Olympus. Funeral rituals were fundamental. Offering a proper burial, with a coin or obol placed under the tongue of the deceased, was not only an act of respect but a necessary step for the soul to cross the river Acheron. An unburied soul was condemned to wander eternally on the riverbank, unable to find rest. This demonstrates how tangible this journey was for them. Death could not be avoided, therefore it had to be understood. Poets like Homer and Hesiod laid the foundations for this worldview. In the Odyssey, Odysseus travels to the underworld not to confront it, but to consult it, seeking wisdom in the shadow of the seer Tiresias. This quest for knowledge in the afterlife is proof that for the Greeks, the world of the dead was not only a place of punishment, but a source of ancestral wisdom. And this is the vision that will accompany us on our journey. Before you settle in, take a moment to give the video a like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to discover who joins us from all corners of the world. This is Sleepy History, and my goal is for this story to immerse you in a unique experience as you drift off to sleep. Hades, the ruler of the underworld, was a figure of enormous importance and often misunderstood. Contrary to what one might think, the Greeks did not see him as an embodiment of evil or a demon. In reality, Hades was responsible for maintaining cosmic balance. His power was immense, but his role was not to punish arbitrarily. He was the guardian of the dead, the host of souls. His name, which means the Invisible One, already reveals his nature. He rarely left his realm and was one of the three great sons of Cronus, along with Zeus and Poseidon. After the defeat of the Titans, dominion over the universe was divided, and Hades was given the underworld, an inevitable realm for all, gods and mortals alike. His presence symbolized the inevitability of death. He was not invoked lightly, and many preferred to refer to him with euphemisms like the Rich One or the Hospitable One. For he was, in a way, the owner of all the riches the earth held, including precious metals and crops. Alongside him reigned Persephone, whose story is one of the most beautiful and tragic in mythology. She was the daughter of Demeter, goddess of agriculture, and her life unfolded in flowering fields, surrounded by nymphs and joy. However, one day, while gathering daffodils, the earth opened and Hades emerged in his chariot, carrying her off to his shadowy realm to make her his queen. Persephone's abduction unleashed chaos upon the earth. Demeter, in her despair, neglected her duties, causing a devastating famine. Spring vanished, the land became barren, and mortals began to die. Faced with this crisis, Zeus intervened, but it was too late. Persephone had already eaten pomegranate seeds in the underworld. According to the law of the gods, whoever ate something in the realm of the dead could not return to the world of the living. Compromise was reached. Persephone would spend part of the year, usually 6 months, with Hades in the underworld, and the other part with her mother on the surface. Her return marked the arrival of spring and the blossoming of life, while her descent coincided with winter and barrenness. This duality made her a unique deity, a goddess who represented both life and death, the eternal cycle of nature. She was the queen who ruled the dead, but also the goddess who guaranteed life on the surface. The presence of Hades and Persephone constantly reminded us that death and life are not separate concepts, but parts of a cycle. They were the deities who united the world above with the world below, and their influence extended beyond their domains, affecting every season and every life on Earth. Now that we understand the role of their rulers, it is time to descend and visualize the realm they presided over. The geography of the Greek underworld was not simply a hole in the earth. It was a vast and complex realm, with its own topography, rivers, and distinct planes of existence. Let's imagine we are on the surface in the world of the living. The first step toward the underworld is not a physical journey by boat, but a descent through what the Greeks considered entrances to the subterranean world. These could be deep caves, hot springs, or lakes shrouded in dense mist, places where the separation between worlds was more tenuous. Once we cross the threshold, we find ourselves on the bank of the first and most famous of its rivers, the Acheron, the River of Sorrow. Its current was slow, its waters dark and murky, and its banks were filled with the souls of the dead who could not cross. Herein lay the first challenge, a payment that many historians believe influenced the funerary customs of the time. The obol, a small coin placed under the tongue of the deceased to pay the ferryman Charon for passage. Without this coin, the soul was condemned to wander eternally on the shore, a grim image reflecting the importance of rituals. The underworld was not a single place, but a collection of realms or sections. Once across the Acheron, the soul arrived at the great plain of the Asphodel Meadows. This was the destination for most souls, those who had not committed great crimes or performed heroic deeds. It was a bleak place, filled with shadows without memory, where life was a dull and purposeless existence. But for the most distinguished, for better or for worse, the geography changed. At the deepest end, a dark and abysmal prison called Tartarus served as a place of eternal punishment. Great sinners like Sisyphus and Tantalus were there, condemned to suffer torment for all eternity. It was also the place where Zeus had imprisoned the Titans. At the opposite pole lay the Elysian Fields, a paradise of eternal spring for heroes, poets, and those who had lived virtuous lives. It was a luminous place, filled with music and peace, a reward that contrasted sharply with the melancholy of the Asphodel Meadows and the suffering of Tartarus. Sometimes the Isles of the Blessed were also mentioned, an even more sublime paradise for those who had been reborn 3 times and attained perfection. Thus, we see that the structure of the underworld was not uniform, but rather a reflection of life on Earth, a place for ordinary mortals, a punishment for the wicked, and a reward for the righteous. It was a moral geography, where the soul's fate depended on the actions performed in life. And it is this complex structure that we will explore in detail as we continue our journey. The Greeks didn't imagine the entrance to the underworld as a single door, but rather as multiple gateways scattered across the geography of the known world. These were natural portals, places where the veil between the world of the living and the dead seemed thinnest. These entrances weren't mere myth. The ancients firmly believed in their existence and often associated them with real geological phenomena. One of the most famous examples was Lavernus, a volcanic lake in what is now Italy. Its name in Greek meant birdless, because it was believed that the sulfurous gas emissions were so toxic that they killed any creature that tried to fly over it. This deadly atmosphere made it the perfect place to imagine an entrance to the subterranean world. It is said that the hero Aeneas, in his epic journey narrated by Virgil, descended to the underworld precisely from this place, guided by the Cumaean Sibyl. In mainland Greece, myth pointed to Cape Taenarum in the Peloponnese as another of these gateways. There, a deep and mysterious cave was considered one of the gates of Hades. Legend has it that it was from this cave that Hercules, in his 12th and most perilous labor, descended to capture Cerberus, the 3-headed dog. The story not only tells us of a physical entrance, but also reveals the courage and daring required to attempt such a journey. Caves, in general, were seen as potential gateways to the underworld. It was not difficult for the Greek mind to associate the darkness and depth of these rock formations with the realm of shadows. The constant descent and the absence of light made them the ideal place to imagine the beginning of a soul's journey. A lesser-known example is the Cave of the Nymphs on the island of Ithaca, which was also believed to be connected to the afterlife. In the Odyssey, Homer describes it as having two entrances, one for mortals and one for the gods, which underscores that these portals were not mere holes but passages with their own rules. These gateways of the earth remind us that for the Greeks, the underworld was not an abstract and distant concept. It was there, beneath their feet, hidden in plain sight, yet ever present in the surrounding landscape. It was a constant reminder that death was an intrinsic part of the world, as real as the sun in the sky or the mountains on the horizon. Every cave or misty lake became a threshold, a point of no return. The river Acheron, whose name meant the river of sorrow, was much more than a murky body of water. It was the first great filter, the inescapable boundary separating the world of the living from that of the dead. Its role was crucial in the soul's journey, and it offers us one of the most powerful and somber images in Greek mythology. Mythological geography describes it as a subterranean river flowing through the depths, dark and fetid, a place of pain and lamentation. However, in the real world, the Greeks believed that rivers existed that represented this Acheron on Earth. For example, in the region of Epirus, in present-day Greece, there is a river called Acheron that flows into a lake that the ancients identified as the gateway to the underworld. Its waters, often obscured by the surrounding earth and rocky landscape, undoubtedly contributed to this belief. But the true significance of the Acheron River lay not in its geography, but in the rite of passage it represented. On its banks, the souls of the deceased gathered, not as whole beings, but as shades, waiting their turn to cross. However, not all souls could make it. This is where Charon, the ferryman of the underworld, comes in, a figure as iconic as Hades. Charon was described as a stern old man with a disheveled beard and fiery eyes. His job was to transport souls, but he didn't do it out of charity. He charged a fare. The toll was an obol, a small coin. The custom of placing a coin under the tongue of the deceased was an essential funerary ritual in ancient Greece, guaranteeing the soul's passage. Without this payment, the soul could not cross the river and was condemned to wander the banks of the Acheron. The image of these unburied souls, crying out for passage and ignored by the implacable Charon, is one of the most desolate in mythology. It speaks to the profound value the Greeks placed on burial and funeral rites. It was not merely a ceremony for the living, but an indispensable requirement for eternal rest. The river's current was not the problem, but the inability to pay the toll, to comply with the customs. It was the first and greatest obstacle, a grim reminder that the journey to the afterlife had its own rules and that ignoring them came at a cost that transcended death. In Greek mythology, Charon was not a god, but a primordial entity, a genie or daimon who fulfilled the most crucial role in the soul's journey. He was the son of Erebus and Nyx, darkness and night, revealing his ancient nature. His disheveled appearance and sour temper, with eyes that blazed with a grim fire, made him a fearsome figure. His job was simple but uncompromising, to ferry souls across the river Acheron, but not as a free service. He charged a toll of an obol. This custom was not merely a mythological detail, but a real and widespread funerary practice. Family members made sure to uphold this tradition, convinced that it was necessary for the soul to cross the river and find rest. The consequences of not paying were terrible. The soul was trapped in a gloomy and melancholic limbo, unable to reach the underworld or return to the world of the living. Even heroes like Odysseus encountered Charon as an obstacle on their journey to the underworld, demonstrating the crucial importance of funerary rituals and the respect due to them. His soul appears before Achilles and begs him to bury his body so that he can cross the gates of Hades. Charon, in his role as ferryman, symbolized order in the Greek cosmos. His existence and his rules served as a reminder that, regardless of who you were in life, everyone had to follow the same path to death. The offering of the obol was, for ordinary people, a bureaucratic formality of the afterlife, a requirement no one could evade. His boat was the vehicle of final justice, and the fare was proof that the deceased had been honored and remembered on earth. The Acheron, whose name means the river of woe, flowed through the depths of the earth. Its nature was so somber that its waters were said to be the physical manifestation of pain and suffering. In mythology, it is described as a murky stream of muddy, pestilent waters that snaked through a desolate landscape. Its banks were filled with withered reeds and wandering souls, and the feelings of these souls mingled with the murmur of its waters, creating an atmosphere of perpetual sadness and desolation. But the Acheron was not alone. In Greek cosmology, it was one of the 5 great rivers of the underworld, each with a particular meaning and function. However, the Acheron was the first that souls had to cross, whether in Charon's boat or, for heroes, on foot. This river not only had a mythical existence but was also represented in the actual geography of Greece. In Epirus, a river of the same name flowed into a lake that the ancients considered the entrance to Hades. The rivers of the region reinforced this belief. It was believed that the oracle of the dead resided in its waters, a place where the living could communicate with souls, strengthening the idea that the Acheron was a bridge between both worlds. The Acheron, therefore, was more than just a river. It was a symbol of transition, of the final separation between life and death. The journey to the afterlife was not easy, and once crossed, there was no turning back. It was the point of no return. The Styx, whose name means the hateful or the abhorrent, was another of the most sacred and feared rivers of the underworld. Its importance affected not only mortal souls but also the gods. On Olympus, its power resided in the solemnity and inviolability of the oaths sworn upon it. Unlike the Acheron, which was a river of sorrow for souls, the Styx represented eternal hatred and loyalty. It is described as a swampy river that formed the boundary between the world of the living and the subterranean realm, surrounded by an atmosphere of profound solemnity. The Styx's most important function was its role in oaths. When an Olympian god needed to make a promise that could not be broken, he swore upon its waters. This oath was the most powerful guarantee in the Greek cosmos. Breaking a promise made upon the Styx was such a grave act that the offending god was deprived of nectar and ambrosia for a year and exiled from the councils of Olympus for 9 more. This punishment served as a reminder that, despite their immortality, even the gods were subject to the laws of fate and cosmic order. One of the most famous myths related to the Styx is that of Achilles. His mother dipped him in its waters to make him invulnerable, but she held him by the heel, which remained above the river. This vulnerability became his undoing, for it was through this single point that he met his death. The story of Achilles perfectly illustrates the power and solemnity of the Styx. It was much more than a river of the underworld. It was a symbol of divine justice, a guardian of promises, and a guarantor of order. Its waters not only separated the worlds, but also united the gods in an unbreakable pact of honor. Cocytus, whose name means the river of lament or weeping, was a somber stream located deeper in the underworld, with an even more desolate function than that of Acheron. It was said that its waters were formed from the eternal tears and laments of the souls who had been unable to cross Acheron and who, therefore, lived condemned to perpetual sorrow. Cocytus represented despair and pain, an emotional rather than physical torment. In some versions, it is described as a tributary of Acheron, carrying the anguish of wandering souls. The image is reminiscent of the river Phlegethon, which we will discuss later. The idea that the waters of a river could be formed from human emotions is a powerful concept in Greek mythology. It reflects the belief that pain and suffering did not end with life, but left an indelible mark in the afterlife. Cocytus was evidence of one's own existence in Hades. In ancient literature, such as Virgil's Aeneid, Cocytus appears in descriptions of Tartarus, the prison of the damned. It was located near the souls suffering the most severe punishments, such as Tantalus or Sisyphus, illustrating the connection between eternal torment and damnation. Although not a physical obstacle, it represented an emotional and psychological challenge, a landscape of despair that the souls had to traverse. It was the liquid manifestation of the underworld's infinite sorrow. Phlegethon, whose name means river of fire or the burning one, was the antithesis of the other rivers of the underworld. Unlike the shadowy currents of Acheron and Cocytus, Phlegethon was a river of liquid fire, an incandescent current flowing with lava and flames. Its function in the geography of Hades was unique. It was not a river for souls to cross, but a barrier and prison. It was believed to surround Tartarus, the deepest and darkest prison of the underworld, where great sinners were punished and where Zeus had imprisoned the Titans. No one could escape these eternal prisons. Its presence was a constant warning of the punishment awaiting those who defied the gods or committed acts of extreme wickedness. The image of a river of fire in an underground world reflected the Greek perception of divine justice. While most souls lived a dull existence in the Asphodel Meadows, those sent to Tartarus faced physical and eternal torment. The Phlegethon was the guardian of this punishment, a manifestation of divine power to inflict pain on those who deserved it. Virgil's Aeneid describes it with chilling realism. A river of fire surrounding a fortified castle in Tartarus, a place of tangible punishment, yet with unimaginable suffering. It represented divine wrath, a torment that burned without consuming, and recalled the unyielding justice of the Olympian gods and Hades. The Lethe, whose name means forgetfulness, was the last of the great rivers and the most enigmatic. Unlike the others, it caused neither pain nor fear, but offered peace, a release from the memories of earthly life. It was described as a serene river, whose waters could erase memory. Souls arriving at the Asphodel Meadows or preparing to reincarnate used it to forget their past. This forgetting was not a punishment, but a necessity. For souls in perpetual melancholy, forgetting past pain and joys allowed them to find a form of peace. For those preparing to reincarnate, it was a new beginning without the burden of previous lives. This reflects the deep Greek belief in the cycle of life and death. Forgetting was not seen as a tragedy, but as a necessary step forward. The souls of heroes and the righteous admitted to the Celtic fields could also drink from Lethe, but in a different way. Forgetting was optional, allowing them to remember their deeds and losses. Ancient texts, especially Sophic and Platonic, emphasized the importance of Lethe in reincarnation. In the myth of her, recounted in Plato's Republic, souls must drink from Lethe before choosing their next life, and those who drank too much lost the wisdom to make good decisions. This shows us that, although the river offered oblivion, souls were considered valuable and necessary. Lethe was the river of forgetfulness and, therefore, the river of final peace. Its existence reminds us that death is not only the end of life but also the beginning of a new stage, whether in a state of perpetual oblivion or at the start of a new cycle of existence. It was the point at which the soul shed its earthly identity to become part of a new world. Hades, the ruler of the underworld, is one of the most misunderstood figures in all of Greek mythology. Far from the Christian concept of the devil or Satan, Hades was neither an evil deity nor a tempter of souls. His role was that of a ruler, a stern guardian and impartial administrator of the realm of the dead. He was a king, not a jailer. His power was immense, equivalent to that of his brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and himself, who drew lots for the domains of the universe. Zeus received the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades, by lot, the vast and shadowy realm beneath the earth's surface. His name, meaning the invisible one, reflected his reserved nature and how rarely he left his realm. He was a feared god, not out of malice, but because of his inevitability. Uttering his name was risky, and he was often referred to by euphemisms like Pluto, the Rich One, for he possessed all the mineral wealth of the earth. His figure was marked by respect and awe. He was not worshipped with the same fervor as Zeus or Apollo, and his sanctuaries were few and far between. Hades was an impartial judge, a god who made his own wishes come true. He didn't interfere in the affairs of the living unless necessary, and his primary concern was preventing the souls of the dead from returning to the mortal world. He was the guardian of cosmic balance. The solitude of his realm and his solemn nature are often misunderstood. Hades wasn't a melancholic god, but a pragmatic one. He was the son of Cronus and Rhea, and once he attained his kingdom, he became a devoted husband and king, sharing his throne with Persephone. In short, Hades is a just yet somber sovereign, a god who embodies the solemnity of death and the impartiality of fate. He wasn't humanity's enemy, but rather its final host, the god of death. And if you've made it this far in the video, I hope you're already subscribed to the channel. This is Sleepy History, and my wish is to create a huge community of people who love knights and knowledge, connected by the intrinsic desire to learn more in order to know themselves better and live a fuller life. I always say it, and I'll say it again. Take a moment to subscribe, share this video with a knowledge-obsessed friend, and, if your generous spirit allows, leave a thank you. In any case, my gratitude is already assured just for sharing this moment together. Now then, let's continue with the story. Persephone, the queen of the underworld, is a figure of profound duality. Her story is not only a myth about the abduction of a goddess, but also an allegory about the cycles of life and death, of winter and spring. Before her life in the shadows, Persephone, whose name meant she who brings death, was known as Kore, the maiden, daughter of Zeus and Demeter, the powerful goddess of agriculture. Her life was pure light and joy. She spent her days in the fields of Nyssa, surrounded by nymphs, dancing and gathering flowers. She was the embodiment of spring, of the earth's fertility. But that happiness came to an end when the lonely Hades, moved by her beauty, decided to make her his queen. With Zeus's help, he emerged from the depths of the earth in a black chariot, splitting the earth open to carry her away. Persephone's cry echoed across the heavens and seas, but only the goddess Hecate and the sun god Helios heard it. The earth closed again, and the young woman vanished from the world of the living. Persephone's abduction unleashed profound grief in her mother, Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. In her despair, neglected her duties. The earth became barren, the crops withered, and famine ravaged humanity. Winter arrived for the first time, an endless winter that threatened to end all life on earth. Mortals died, and there were no offerings for the gods. Faced with the catastrophe, Zeus was forced to intervene and ordered Hades to return Persephone to her mother. However, there was a problem. While in the underworld, Persephone had eaten 6 pomegranate seeds. According to the unbreakable laws of the subterranean realm, anyone who consumed any food there could not return completely. An agreement was reached. Persephone would spend part of the year 1 month for each seed, with Hades in the underworld. The rest of the year she would return to her mother on the surface. This arrangement explains the duality of her existence and the cycle of the seasons. When Persephone is with Demeter, the earth blossoms, plants grow, and spring arrives. But when she descends to Hades to rule alongside her husband, her mother mourns her absence, and the earth becomes cold and barren, giving way to winter. As queen, Persephone was not a prisoner. She became a powerful and respected sovereign, a goddess both feared and revered, for she held power over life and death. She was the figure who united the two worlds, the one who brought spring to the living and reigned over the shadows. Although Hades' realm was immense, the sovereign did not judge souls himself. Instead, he delegated this crucial task to a trio of legendary mortals who, because of their wisdom and justice in life, had been elevated to the status of judges of the underworld. These were Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, 3 brothers whose role was to determine the final fate of each soul. Their origin is fascinating. They were the sons of Zeus and Europa, which granted them a divine connection, but at the same time, they had lived as men on earth, which gave them an understanding of the human condition. This made them impartial judges, capable of comprehending both the justice of the gods and the failings of mortals. Minos, the supreme judge. Minos was the most famous and the most important of the 3. In life, he was the legendary king of Crete, known for his wisdom and his strict code of laws. After his death, he became the chief judge of the underworld. He was depicted with a scepter in his hand, a symbol of his authority, and his role was to deliver the final verdict. Minos had the last word, the decision that sent souls to their ultimate fate. He was considered the most severe of the 3, a judge who was not swayed by compassion, but rather guided by logic and the strict application of the law. Rhadamanthus, the judge of the Easterners. Rhadamanthus was another great king and lawgiver in his lifetime, ruling over the Aegean Islands. He was famous for his unwavering justice, and it was said that his laws were so perfect that they inspired other lawmakers throughout Greece. In the underworld, his jurisdiction was over the souls from the East, the Easterners. His task was to question the souls about their lives and deeds, and his judgment determined whether they deserved to be punished in Tartarus or rewarded in the Elysian Fields. Aeacus, the keeper of the keys. The third brother, Aeacus, was known in his lifetime as a pious and just king of the island of Aegina. After his death, he was entrusted with the role of keeper of the keys to Hades. His role was to examine the souls of those who came from Europe and resolve the simpler cases. He was considered the most compassionate of the three, in charge of the souls that were neither heroes nor great sinners, guiding them to the field of Asphodel. His task was to maintain order at the entrance and ensure that the flow of souls remained constant. Together, these three judges formed the supreme court of the underworld. Their existence served a crucial purpose: to demonstrate that death was not the end of accountability. The Greeks believed that every action in life, good or bad, would be judged. The judgment was not arbitrary, but a fair and methodical process, carried out by judges who understood both divine law and human frailty. A soul's fate depended on the life it had led, and the court of Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus was the manifestation of that truth. We continue our descent into the heart of the underworld. After crossing the rivers, the soul comes face to face with the most feared and emblematic guardian of the realm, Cerberus, Cerberus. His origin is as monstrous as his appearance. Cerberus was the offspring of two of the most terrifying creatures in Greek mythology: the gigantic and terrible Typhon, father of all monsters, and the half-woman, half-serpent Echidna, mother of all monsters. From this union were born hideous creatures, and Cerberus was no exception. The most common image we have of Cerberus is that of a three-headed dog, each head adorned with a mane of snakes. His tail was a living, hissing serpent, and his claws were ferocious. In literature, descriptions vary. Homer refers to him simply as the Hound of Hades, but later authors, such as Hesiod, described him as having 50 heads, and the poet Pindar even attributed 100 to him. However, the image of Cerberus with 3 heads became popular and is the one that has endured in popular culture. Cerberus's role as guardian was twofold and of paramount importance for maintaining order in the underworld. His primary function was to protect the entrance and exit to the realm. His ferocity was not directed at the souls of the dead entering, as his task was precisely to let them pass. But if a soul attempted to escape, or if a mortal tried to enter, Cerberus transformed into a force of nature, an unstoppable guardian who halted them with his ferocious fangs and thunderous bark. His presence was the guarantee that the underworld was a place of no return. Despite his fearsome reputation, Cerberus was not invincible. In mythology, only a few heroes managed to overcome him. The most famous case is that of Hercules, who, in his 12th and final labor, was tasked with capturing the hound Cerberus and bringing him back to the world of the living. Hercules, with the help of the goddess Athena and the god Hermes, and displaying superhuman strength, managed to subdue him unarmed and brought him to Eurystheus at Mycenae. After showing the hound to the terrified king, Heracles returned him to the underworld, thus completing the labor. Another hero, Orpheus, soothed him with the sweetness of his music, and the Cumaean Sibyl offered him a cake of honey and soporific herbs to lull him to sleep and allow Aeneas to enter Hades. Cerberus was not merely an animal. He was a force of nature, an embodiment of the order and unyielding justice of the underworld. Their presence served as a constant reminder that once the journey to the afterlife began, there was no turning back. The Erinyes, known in Roman mythology as the Furies, were not mere monsters. They were primordial goddesses of vengeance and justice, inexorable forces dwelling in the underworld. Their existence was a constant reminder that crimes, especially those committed against blood and family, would not go unpunished. Their origin is as ancient as the creation of the universe itself. They were born from the blood of Uranus, the sky, when his son Cronus castrated him. This violent and bloody genesis directly links them to vengeance and punishment. They were described as winged figures, dressed in black, with snakes entwined in their hair, carrying torches and whips. Their eyes dripped venom, and their mere presence inspired terror. The role of the Erinyes in the underworld was that of agents of divine justice. Their task was not to punish just any soul, but those who had committed particularly heinous crimes and, most importantly, those who had violated the sacred bonds of family. They were the relentless pursuers of parricides, matricides, and those who had broken solemn oaths. They hunted their victims tirelessly, both in the world of the living and the world of the dead, until they went mad or died. Their vengeance was so potent that it not only affected the guilty party but could also curse their descendants. The myth of Orestes is the most famous example of their pursuit. After killing his mother, Clytemnestra, to avenge the murder of his father, Agamemnon, Orestes was relentlessly pursued by the Erinyes. His torment was both physical and mental. Only the intervention of the gods in a trial in Athens, where Orestes was acquitted, made them stop. This trial did not eliminate them but transformed them. The goddess Athena renamed them the Eumenides, the benevolent ones, and granted them a more honorable role as guardians of justice and law in Athens. The power of the Erinyes resided in the concept of retributive justice. They were neither capricious nor malicious. They were simply fulfilling an inevitable destiny, punishing those who thought they could escape the consequences of their most heinous acts. They were the terror of the guilty conscience and proof that, in the Greek cosmos, crime never went unpunished. Orpheus, whose name is sometimes translated as the Mourning Hound, was another monstrous creature in Greek mythology, closely related to Cerberus. Like Cerberus, Orpheus was the son of the giant Typhon and the fearsome Echidna, making him a pure-blooded beast and one of the most ferocious creatures in the world. His appearance was similar to that of his famous brother, but with 2 heads instead of 3. The legend of Orpheus is linked to the story of the giant Geryon, a being with 3 bodies and 3 heads who ruled a remote island called Erythea, near the ocean. Geryon was famous for owning an immense and precious herd of red cattle, which Orpheus, along with the herdsman Eurydice, fiercely guarded. The 10th of Hercules' 12 labors was to steal Geryon's cattle. Upon arriving on the island, Hercules faced its most fearsome guardian, the hound Orpheus. The fight was fierce, but Hercules, with his immense strength, managed to kill him with his club. Afterward, the hero had to face the herdsman Eurydice and, finally, Geryon himself. Although Orpheus did not guard the entrance to the underworld, his legend indirectly links him to the realm of Hades. Like Cerberus, he was a monstrous dog, the son of Typhon and Echidna, who protected a remote and valuable kingdom. His fate was to be defeated by the same hero who, later, would tame his 3-headed brother. Orpheus was, in essence, a reflection of Cerberus on the surface of the earth, an infernal guardian in a mortal realm. His story demonstrates that the creatures of the underworld were not confined to the depths of the earth, but that their lineage and power extended to the farthest reaches of the known world. Aside from the more well-known guardians, the Greek underworld was populated by a variety of monsters and terrifying entities, whose presence maintained order and reminded mortals of the dangers of this world. Typhon, the father of monsters, while not residing directly in the underworld, had an undeniable connection to it. Born of Gaia and Tartarus, he was a colossal creature with 100 fire-breathing dragon heads. His birth was Gaia's attempt to avenge herself on Zeus for the defeat of the Titans. After an epic battle, Zeus defeated him and crushed him beneath Mount Etna in Sicily. Since then, Typhon has caused volcanic eruptions and is considered the father of Cerberus, Orpheus, and other infernal monsters. The Empusi, female demons who served Hecate, could shapeshift, seducing men only to attack them later. They had 1 leg of bronze and the other of a donkey, making them terrifying hybrid creatures. The Charis, daughters of Nyx, were female spirits of violent death. They roamed battlefields, thirsting for blood, waiting to claim the souls of the dying. Unlike Thanatos, the embodiment of peaceful death, The Cerberus represented brutal and tragic death, such as that of war or murder. These monsters and guardians were not mere antagonists. They embodied the fear, punishment, and inevitability of violent death, underscoring the grim nature of Hades. After crossing rivers and passing guardians, we arrived at the place where most souls resided, the Field of Asphodel. Its name evokes the asphodel, a pale, ghostly flower that once covered this vast plain. It was neither a place of punishment nor reward, but a gray and purposeless final destination where souls lost their memory and individuality. For the Greeks, this neutral existence was perhaps the most subtle and cruel form of condemnation. The souls that wandered the Field of Asphodel were mere shadows, powerless specters who had forgotten the pleasures and sufferings of their earthly lives. In the Odyssey, Homer vividly describes this place. Odysseus descends to the Underworld and encounters the souls of former companions like Ajax and Achilles. To enable them to speak and regain a moment of consciousness, Odysseus had to offer them blood. Only by drinking it could they briefly become who they had been in life. The soul of Achilles, the greatest of warriors, confesses to Odysseus that he would rather be a poor man's servant on earth than king of all the dead in Hades. This phrase sums it all up. The Asphodel Meadows represented an empty existence, so devoid of meaning that the humblest life on the surface seemed preferable. It was the embodiment of the Greek fear of death, not of pain, but of oblivion. Beyond the melancholic gloom of the Asphodel Meadows, one reaches the most feared region of the underworld, an abyss that is a prison in itself. This is Tartarus, a place of eternal punishment and the prison of the Titans. If Hades was the realm of the dead, Tartarus was the deepest pit in that domain. Hesiod, in the Theogony, describes it as an abyss so immense that a bronze anvil would take 9 days and 9 nights to reach its bottom. It is a place of perpetual darkness surrounded by a triple bronze wall and guarded by iron gates, with the Phlegethon, the river of fire, encircling the prison like a blazing moat. Tartarus was primarily a prison. There, Zeus and the Olympian gods imprisoned the Titans after their defeat in the Titanomachy. Under the watchful eye of the Hecatonchires, 100-armed giants, the Titans remained condemned to eternal torment. Their imprisonment served as a warning to all beings, divine and mortal, that not even the most ancient deities could escape Zeus's justice. Over time, Tartarus also became a place of punishment for mortals whose crimes were so heinous that they deserved perpetual torment. These were not common offenses, but acts of extreme arrogance, contempt for the gods, or deceit. There, legendary figures like Sisyphus, condemned to eternally push a boulder, Tantalus, forever hungry and thirsty, and Ixion, bound to a wheel of fire, suffered. Their torments were not random. Each punishment in Tartarus reflected the nature of the crime committed in life. It was not a place of silent lamentation like the Asphodel Meadows, but a space of active and perpetual suffering. There, the most rigorous justice was manifested, a reminder that while most souls find empty rest, for a few, death merely marks the beginning of their condemnation. After the despair of Tartarus and the monotony of the Asphodel Meadows, the soul found relief upon reaching the most coveted destination in the underworld, a paradise of eternal happiness. This was the Elysian Fields, reserved for heroes and righteous souls. The Elysian Fields were the opposite of Tartarus, a blessed place, bathed in a gentle light, where it was always spring. The grass grew green and abundant, the trees were laden with golden fruit, and the air was filled with the music and song of birds. Here, souls retained their vigor and memories. They could relive their lives, participate in athletic competitions, and enjoy eternal banquets in an atmosphere of constant peace. This paradise was not open to everyone, but only to those who had been favored by the gods or had demonstrated exceptional virtue and a heroic life. Unlike Asphodel, those who reached Elysium were remembered, honored, and rewarded for their deeds. Among them were heroes like Menelaus, taken directly to the fields as Zeus's son-in-law, and figures like Cadmus and Peleus. Even Achilles appeared in some versions, depending on the tale. The concept of this paradise offered a fundamental hope in Greek culture, showing that human excellence and divine favor could transcend death. In Elysian Fields, the glory earned in life remained intact. The memory of heroes did not fade into oblivion but was celebrated in an idyllic setting. This realm not only rewarded but also reflected Greek values: glory, virtue, and honor. For the Greeks, the promise of a place where one could live eternally, preserving one's memory, surrounded by beauty and tranquility, was the greatest possible honor. It represented the perfect rest for those who had striven diligently throughout their lives. Beyond the Elysian Fields lay an even more sublime level of happiness: the Isles of the Blessed. While Elysium was a paradise for heroes and the righteous, these islands were reserved for souls who had attained absolute perfection. Entry to this realm did not depend on a single virtuous life, but on a complete cycle of reincarnation. A soul had to have lived 3 righteous and virtuous lives, and after each death, it was admitted to the Elysian Fields. After each stay, it had the option of drinking from the river Lethe to forget its past and choose a new life in the mortal world. By completing this cycle 3 times, the soul earned the right to reside eternally in the Isles of the Blessed. This place was a paradise of pure happiness, with a perfect climate, constant sunshine and gentle light, and sweet air. Unlike the Elysian Fields, which offered rest, these islands were a realm of ecstasy, free from worries, sorrows, or bitter memories of the mortal world. In Orphic tradition and in Plato's texts, this place represented the culmination of the soul's journey, the reward for overcoming the trials of life and death. It was said that in this paradise the soul attained conscious immortality and was freed from the cycle of reincarnation. Some myths, such as those of Pindar, even placed the kingdom of Cronus, the ancient king of the Titans, in his exile here. The Isles of the Blessed represented the pinnacle of the afterlife hierarchy and demonstrated that, for the Greeks, the soul's ultimate fate was not predetermined, but rather depended on virtue, courage, and wisdom, with a reward of eternal happiness surpassing anything known in mortal life. After traversing the realms of the Underworld, from the monotony of Asphodel to the peace of the Isles of the Blessed, we return to the abyss of Tartarus to meet its most notorious inhabitants, those who, through their cunning and arrogance, received eternal punishment. We begin with one of the most iconic, Sisyphus. He was no ordinary man, but the cunning founder and king of Ephra, later known as Corinth. His fame stemmed not from warfare, but from his wit, which he used to deceive gods and mortals alike for his own gain. His first act of arrogance was betraying Zeus. When Zeus abducted the nymph Aegina, Sisyphus witnessed the abduction and, in exchange for a spring for his city, revealed it to his father, the river god Asopus. Zeus, furious at the insolence, ordered Thanatos, the personification of death, to drag him down to the underworld. But Sisyphus was too cunning and managed to chain Thanatos. With death stopped, no one on earth could die, not the old, the sick, or the wounded in war. Chaos reigned until Ares, frustrated by the lack of deaths in his wars, freed Thanatos. Finally, death took Sisyphus, but his cunning did not end his life. Before dying, he had instructed his wife not to give him a proper burial. Once in the underworld, Sisyphus complained to Persephone that his wife had not given him proper funeral rites and asked permission to return briefly to the world of the living to punish her. Persephone agreed, and Sisyphus returned to his palace. However, instead of punishing his wife, he simply refused to return to Hades. The second time death came for him, Sisyphus had lived many more years. The gods, tired of his insolence and defiance of the natural order, decided to impose an eternal punishment on him. It would not be physical torment, but a condemnation to futility. In Tartarus, he was condemned to push an enormous boulder up a steep slope, which each time he reached the top would roll back down. Sisyphus had to descend and begin again for all eternity. His torment lay not in the effort itself, but in the constant futility, the ever-frustrated hope, and the perpetual return to the starting point. Following Sisyphus's condemnation, we find another of the great tormented souls of Tartarus, Tantalus. His torment was not due to effort, but to desire. Tantalus, son of Zeus and king of Phrygia or Lydia, had the privilege of attending the banquets of the gods on Olympus. This favor filled him with arrogance and overconfidence, which the Greeks called Ibris. Believing he could deceive the gods, he decided to test their omniscience. His most atrocious crime was inviting the gods to a banquet in his palace and serving them the flesh of his own son, Pelops, which he had dismembered and cooked. He hoped that by eating human flesh, the gods would prove themselves not to be omniscient. However, the gods, except for Demeter, who was distracted by mourning, immediately recognized the flesh and refused to eat it. They resurrected Pelops and punished Tantalus for his treachery and insolence. Tantalus's punishment was cruelly ironic. He was submerged up to his neck in a lake of clear water, which receded every time he tried to drink, leaving only mud. Above his head hung branches laden with delicious fruit, apples, figs, and pears, but every attempt to reach them was thwarted by the wind, keeping the fruit out of his reach. Tantalus was condemned to eternal torment of unfulfilled desire and perpetual frustration. His punishment embodies eternal hunger and thirst. His story reminds us that even the favorites of the gods could fall, and that the arrogance of mortals would always be met with a cruel justice, but one proportionate to the crime committed. The Spanish word tantalizer comes directly from his name, a legacy that shows how deeply his story has been etched into the cultural imagination. Following the futility of Sisyphus and the unfulfilled desire of Tantalus, Tartarus presents another exemplary punishment that combines perpetual motion with the torment of fire. This is the punishment of Ixion, the man who dared to desire a goddess. Ixion was king of the Topidi, a tribe in Thessaly. His story begins with an act of betrayal. After promising his father-in-law, Ionius, a dowry for his daughter's hand, Ixion refused to pay. To avenge himself, his father-in-law stole some of his horses, but Ixion devised a cruel punishment. He invited him to a banquet and, upon his arrival, threw him into a pit of burning coals, killing him. This first murder of a relative by marriage was so grave that mortals refused to purify him. Abandoned and tormented by the Furies, Ixion sought help on Mount Olympus. Zeus, in a rare act of compassion, purified him and invited him to his palace. But divine kindness awakened in Ixion an unbridled arrogance. Falling in love with Hera, the queen of the gods, he attempted to seduce her. Zeus, aware of his attempt, created a cloud in Hera's exact likeness, called Nephili. Ixion, blinded by desire, lay with her, and from this union were born the centaurs, creatures half man and half horse. Ixion's punishment was severe. Zeus banished him to Tartarus and bound him to a fiery wheel, which would spin endlessly for all eternity. His torment combined physical pain with the frustration of endless motion. The story of Ixion reminds us that although the gods can be forgiving, the arrogance of a mortal who tries to equal them receives a terrible and eternal punishment. After the torments of Sisyphus, Tantalus, and Ixion, we now turn to a collective punishment, one that befell 50 sisters, a torment that speaks of betrayal and endless labor. We are referring to the condemnation of the Danaïdes. They were the 50 daughters of Danaus, king of Argos, whose story stems from a family feud with his twin brother, Aegyptus, ruler of the neighboring kingdom. Aegyptus had 50 sons and proposed marrying each of Danaus's daughters to end the rivalry. Danaus, suspicious, fled with his daughters to Argos, but Aegyptus's sons pursued them, and they were ultimately forced to accept the marriages. On the wedding night, Danaus ordered his daughters to murder their husbands. 49 obeyed, killing them in their sleep with hairpins or daggers. One of them, Hypermnestra, fell in love with her husband, Lynceus, and helped him escape, thus saving herself from punishment. The other 49, for murder and breaking the sacred bond of marriage, were condemned to Tartarus for eternal punishment. Their torture consisted of filling a large vat with water using bottomless jugs. They would go to a spring or river, fill their vessels, and return to empty them, but the water would immediately run out. They never managed to complete the task, and their labor was endless. This punishment is an example of the poetic justice of the underworld. The crime against marriage, the source of life and society, carried a perpetual sentence that symbolized the impossibility of their crime bearing any fruit. With this, our journey through the great condemned concludes, and we prepare to learn about those who defied death. After witnessing eternal punishments, we return to legends with a glimmer of hope, focusing on those mortals who, out of love or courage, dared to defy death itself. The first and most moving is that of Orpheus and Eurydice, a story of love, music, and the forbidden gaze. Orpheus was no ordinary mortal. He was a prince of Thrace and the greatest musician in mythology. His lyre and his voice possessed a magical power capable of moving nature. Trees bowed, rivers halted their flow, and wild beasts became tame. His heart belonged to the beautiful nymph Eurydice, and their love was so pure that not even the gods envied it. However, their happiness was short-lived. On their wedding day, Eurydice was pursued by the beekeeper Aristeus. While fleeing from him, Eurydice stepped on a venomous snake, which bit her, causing her death. Her soul descended to the underworld, and Orpheus's grief was so intense that his once joyful music transformed into a profound lament that moved gods and mortals alike. In his despair, he decided to undertake an unprecedented act, to descend to the realm of the dead to retrieve his beloved. He ventured into Hades and, instead of fighting, used his lyre as his only weapon. Orpheus's music was so powerful that it moved all who heard it. Cerberus, the three-headed guardian, fell asleep. The souls of the dead paused to listen to him, and even the Erinyes, goddesses of vengeance, wept. Finally, he arrived before the throne of Hades and Persephone. His lament softened the heart of the stern god of the underworld. Hades agreed to return Eurydice, but on one unbreakable condition. She would follow him back to the world of the living, but Orpheus could not look at her until he had completely left the cavern. If he did, she would return to the darkness forever. The pair began the long ascent in silence. Orpheus heard Eurydice's footsteps behind him, but he could not look at her face. The temptation grew with each step. Just as they reached the threshold, blinded by doubt and the desire to confirm that she was following him, Orpheus turned around. In that instant, Eurydice, still a shadow, vanished. Their hands barely touched before she was pulled back into the depths. Orpheus's cry echoed through the underworld, but the opportunity was lost forever. Orpheus's music could not break a rule that not even the gods could violate. Following the tragic tale of Orpheus, we turn to the most audacious journey to the underworld, a feat of strength and courage. Hercules and the capture of Cerberus, his 12th and final labor. Hercules, the greatest hero of Greek mythology, famed for his superhuman strength, was condemned to serve King Eurystheus to atone for a crime committed in a fit of madness brought on by Hera. He was initially given 10 impossible labors, but 2 more were later added, the last being the most dangerous, capturing Cerberus, the guardian of the entrance to the underworld. To prepare, Hercules not only relied on his own strength but also sought divine aid and was initiated into the sacred solution mysteries, a rite that ensured his protection on the journey to the realm of the dead. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, and Athena, goddess of wisdom and protector of the hero, guided him on his descent. The presence of Hercules, a living mortal, caused terror among the souls of the dead, who fled at his approach. Finally, Hercules arrived before Hades' throne and met the god of the dead. Unlike other heroes who tried to deceive or escape, Hercules was direct. He bravely asked permission to take Cerberus. Hades, impressed by the hero's courage, agreed, but on one condition. Hercules had to subdue the three-headed dog unarmed, using only his strength. The confrontation was titanic. Protected by the skin of the Nemean lion, Hercules fought the beast, which attacked him with its multiple heads and serpent's tail. Thanks to his strength, he managed to strangle the dog. Cerberus, the invincible guardian of the underworld, finally surrendered. Hercules, with the tamed dog at his side, ascended to the world of the living. The terror he inspired in King Eurystheus was so great that he hid in a jar and ordered the dog returned immediately. With this labor, Hercules proved himself the greatest hero and defied death itself. His victory over Cerberus marked the final step toward his own immortality and his place among the gods, conquering the fear of death. We continue with heroes who defied death, but now with different motivations. After the music of Orpheus and the strength of Hercules, we embark on a journey guided by necessity. Odysseus's descent to the underworld to consult the seer Tiresias. This story is not a feat of strength, but a quest for knowledge. After 10 years of the Trojan War and another 10 wandering the seas, Odysseus was desperate to return to Ithaca, but his path was blocked by the wrath of Poseidon. The sorceress Circe told him he must descend to the underworld to consult the only mortal who retained his wisdom, Tiresias. The descent was not physical like Heracles's, but a journey across the ocean to the shores of the land of the Cimmerians, a land of mist and perpetual darkness. There, following Circe's instructions, he dug a pit and sacrificed a ram and a ewe. The blood attracted the souls of the dead, who cried out for it to regain their memory and voice. Odysseus held them back until Tiresias drank the blood. He regained enough lucidity to reveal the path home. Resist temptations, avoid the cattle of the god Helios, and, upon his return, confront the suitors who harassed his wife Penelope in the palace. But Odysseus's ordeal did not end there. After listening to Tiresias, his mother, Anticlea, approached the pit. Seeing her, Odysseus felt a deep sadness, for he had not known that she had died during the war. Upon drinking the blood, he recovered his memories and told her about the situation in Ithaca. Then other souls approached, among them Achilles, whom he asked about life after death, and Agamemnon, his former leader at Troy. Odysseus's journey was a visit, not a conquest. Unlike Heracles, he descended not to fight, but to learn. His time in the underworld reveals another aspect of the realm of the dead. Not only a place of punishment and reward, but also a source of forbidden knowledge, where the living could find wisdom that the mortal world did not offer. His journey demonstrates that ingenuity and strategy are just as valuable as brute force. After Odysseus, we find a cautionary tale about hubris. Theseus and Hyperites made a bold and reckless attempt to abduct Persephone, the queen of the underworld. Theseus, the Athenian hero who had defeated the Minotaur, and Hyperites, king of the Lapiths, were inseparable friends, bound by their love of adventure and a bravery that bordered on recklessness. They swore to help each other marry daughters of Zeus. Theseus had already abducted Helen of Troy, then a child, and now it was Hyperites' turn. His desire was extraordinary. Hyperites believed that only a goddess was worthy of being his wife, and he asked Theseus for help in abducting Persephone. Blinded by loyalty and hubris, they ignored the dangers of the underworld. Upon arriving at Hades' palace, the god greeted them with unsettling calm. He heard their audacious demand but did not respond immediately. Cunningly, he invited them to sit on the seat of oblivion. As soon as they did, their bodies were trapped in the stone, and snakes coiled around their limbs. They were condemned to eternal punishment, immobile and unable to think clearly. The story of Theseus and Hyperites teaches that the underworld is no place for mortal arrogance. Unlike other heroes, Theseus and Hyperites had no divine assistance and showed contempt for the laws of death. Only the arrival of Hercules on his 12th labor offered them a brief glimmer of hope. Seeing his friends immobilized, Hercules took pity on them and tried to free them. He managed to pull Theseus from the seat, but when he tried to free Hyperites, the earth trembled, a sign that his fate was sealed. The hero could only save Theseus, leaving Hyperites in his eternal torment. This myth reminds us that even the greatest heroes, if they act arrogantly, cannot defy the will of the gods. Their punishment is perpetual immobility, proof that mortal power has a limit that begins at the gates of the underworld. After adventures driven by love, strength, and ambition, comes the last great hero to defy death, albeit with a different purpose, dictated by fate. Aeneas and his journey to the underworld to learn the future of his people. Aeneas is not Greek, but a Trojan prince, son of the goddess Venus and the mortal Anchises. After the fall of Troy, he was destined to lead the survivors and found a new empire, the Roman people. Narrated by Virgil in the Aeneid, his story reflects a profound sense of duty and a divine purpose. During his journey, harassed by the goddess Juno but guided by the gods, he reached the shores of Cumae. There he sought out the Sibyl, who revealed that to understand his destiny, he must descend to the underworld and consult the soul of his father, Anchises. Aeneas's descent was not to rescue a loved one, but to acquire knowledge. He crossed Lake Avernus, considered the entrance to Hades, protected by a golden bouquet given to him by the Sibyl, a sacred gift for Persephone. He passed by the banks of the Chiron, saw the unburied souls, and crossed the fields of lamentation, encountering Queen Dido, who ignored him for having abandoned her. His most important encounter was with Anchises in the Elysian Fields. The father, moved, not only gave him wise counsel, but also showed him the future of his lineage, the souls of the future great Romans, kings and generals destined to rule the world. He revealed to him the glory of Rome, the empire that Aeneas was destined to found. Aeneas's journey culminates the journeys to the underworld. It was not a struggle against death, but an acceptance of his place in the divine plan. His pilgrimage to Hades allowed him to understand his destiny, glimpse the future, and receive the mandate to found the great Roman people. With his journey, the Greek underworld connected with the legacy of Rome, paving the way for the next chapter of our story. After learning about the daring journeys of the heroes, we delve into a more abstract, yet fundamental, concept that not even Zeus could challenge: the Moirai, known to the Romans as the Parsi, goddesses of fate. The Moirai did not belong to the underworld, but their influence extended directly over it. They were three ancient sisters, daughters of night, making them older than the Olympian gods, and they controlled the thread of life for every being, mortal or immortal. Their will was universal law, immutable and unbreakable, which neither kings nor gods could alter. Each sister had an essential role. The first, Clotho, the spinner, spun the thread of life with her distaff, symbolizing birth and the beginning of existence. The second, Lachesis, the oller, measured the length of the thread with her rod, determining the duration and events of each being's destiny. The third, Atropos, the unyielding, cut the thread with her shears, ending life. Her decision was final and irrevocable, the embodiment of death itself. The fates did not act out of malice, but with strict justice, fulfilling their duty impartially. Their power was absolute. Even the gods had to abide by their will. In the myth of Achilles, his mother Thetis knew that her son would die young and glorious because the fates had so decided. For the Greeks, life was not random, but part of a predetermined cosmic plan. The fate of each soul in Hades was already written before its birth by the weavers of destiny. Having grasped the immutable order of the fates, we delve into a more chaotic and visceral aspect of the end of life: the Charis, female spirits of violent death. They were not goddesses like Hades or Persephone, but demons, daughters of Nyx, the night, ancient and powerful beings linked to darkness. Unlike the Fates, who governed the length of life fairly, or Thanatos, who personified a peaceful death, the Charis embodied sudden, bloody, and brutal death. They were described as winged creatures with dark plumage, sharp claws, and an insatiable thirst for blood. Their preferred haunt was the battlefield, where they hovered over wounded warriors, waiting for the precise moment to snatch their souls. They were also associated with death from plagues, murder, accidents, and other calamities, becoming the manifestation of life's violent end. They were the embodiment of tragic fate, of those who died before their natural time. The presence of the Charis was a terrifying omen. The cries of the dying, the pain, and the blood unfailingly drew them. Their task was to tear the soul from the body of the deceased, in a brutal and undignified act. The belief in the Charis reflected the Greeks' fear of a death not ordained by the Moirai, but rather snatched away by a chaotic and merciless force. They did not fear the inevitability of death, but its violence and cruelty. The Charis served as a reminder that the end could be as terrible as life itself, and that those who died violently had a different fate than those who died of old age. After exploring the chaotic and violent Charis, we turn to their counterpart. We speak of Thanatos, the personification of peaceful death and twin of sleep. Son of Nyx, night, Thanatos had Hypnos, god of sleep, as his brother, showing that death was seen as a rest, a serene release from the body, comparable to sleep. Unlike the Cerberus, Thanatos was depicted as a winged youth, sometimes carrying a sword or an inverted torch, with a solemn and serene face, not bloodthirsty. His role was to gently collect the souls of those who had lived their allotted time, as determined by the fates, acting as the minister of the gods and servant of cosmic order. His role is exemplified in the story of Sisyphus. Zeus sent him to the underworld to retrieve the cunning king, but Sisyphus tricked him and chained him up. With Thanatos imprisoned, no one could die, prolonging the suffering of old age and endless warfare. It was Ares, angered by the chaos in his battles, who freed Thanatos. This story shows that death, far from being an evil, was a necessary part of the natural order. Thanatos represented an inevitable, dignified, and peaceful end, the perfect counterpoint to the violent Cerberus, completing the Greek perception of death as a phenomenon that could be both chaotic and peaceful. After reflecting on Thanatos, the personification of peaceful death, it is natural to discuss his twin brother, Hypnos, the god of sleep. Hypnos was a primordial deity, son of Nyx, the night, and Erebus, the darkness. His relationship with Thanatos was fundamental to the Greeks, who viewed sleep as a rehearsal for death, a temporary rest preceding eternal rest. Hypnos's home was in a dark cave in the underworld, where the sun never shone and the river Lethe murmured, carrying away memories. He was depicted as a gentle, winged youth, sometimes holding a poppy branch or a wand to induce sleep, and occasionally carrying a horn from which he poured sleep upon the earth. Despite his serenity, his power was immense, capable even of influencing the Olympian gods. The most famous myth of Hypnos is recounted in the Iliad. The goddess Hera, Zeus's rival, needed him to fall asleep to favor the Greeks in the Trojan War. She offered Hypnos the hand of one of the Graces in exchange for his help. Although he hesitated, since Zeus had already punished him for inducing sleep, he finally accepted. Covering the earth with mist, Hypnos managed to lull the supreme god to sleep, allowing Hera to fulfill her plan. Hypnos is a bridge between the world of the living and the world of the dead. His proximity to the underworld and the river of forgetfulness makes him a being linked to death, but his purpose is benevolent, to offer rest to those exhausted by life. He represents nocturnal peace and the possibility of repose even in darkness. With Hypnos, we conclude our exploration of the lesser figures of the underworld, preparing to analyze how these ideas influenced the modern world. After traveling through the Greek realms of death, we will see their assimilation by Roman mythology. The Romans, more pragmatic and focused on law and mortal life, adopted Greek cosmology, changing names and concepts. Hades, the lord of the dead, became Pluto, whose name meant rich or wealthy, while other Greek deities and terms were reinterpreted according to their culture. This reflected the Roman view of Pluto as a dual deity. He was not only the king of the dead, but also the god of subterranean riches, minerals, and the fertility of the earth. His nature became less fearsome and more associated with prosperity. Persephone, the queen of the underworld and goddess of spring, became Proserpina. Her myth of the abduction, the cycle of the seasons, and her duality as a goddess of life and death remained almost intact. In Rome, she was also celebrated with spring rituals to ensure the fertility of the crops. The geography of the underworld was preserved. Virgil, in the Aeneid, described Aeneas's journey using the Greek structure, mentioning rivers such as the Acheron and the Styx, and realms such as the Asphodel Meadows, Tartarus, and the Elysian Fields. Cerberus remained the guardian of the gate, and the Erinyes were transformed into the Furies. The Romans' assimilation of the Greek underworld was an act of cultural pragmatism. They felt no need to reinvent the wheel. They simply took the existing myth, gave it Latin names, and integrated it into their worldview. This adoption ensured that the mythology of Hades did not disappear, but rather became a pillar of Western culture, paving the way for much more modern influences. The impact of the Greek underworld transcended Roman mythology. Its concepts and structure became fundamental archetypes of Western literature. A clear example is Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy. Dante not only drew inspiration from Greco-Roman mythology, but also used it as the basis for his own cosmology of the afterlife, adapting the hierarchy of punishments and rewards to Christian theology. The Guide. Dante's Guide in Hell is Virgil, the Roman poet and author of the Aeneid, who also visited the underworld. With this, Dante pays homage to classical literature and establishes a bridge between the ancient and medieval worlds. The river Acheron and the ferryman Charon. Dante encounters the Acheron and its ferryman, Charon, the same figure who transported souls in Greek tradition. The scene of the boat filled with the damned is almost a direct replica of the classical myth. The hierarchy of punishments. Just as in the Greek underworld, Dante's Inferno is not uniform. It is divided into circles, each with a distinct punishment according to the specific sin. This connection between Greek mythology and Christian theology is evident in several key elements. The idea that punishment is proportionate to the crime, so prevalent in Greek myths with Sisyphus or Tantalus, is reflected in Dante's work, where Minos acts as judge of the souls, assigning each one its circle of punishment, just as he did in classical tradition. Although grotesque in his depiction, his function as judge remains intact. The Elysian Fields and Limbo. The first circle of Dante's Inferno, Limbo, is a place without active torment, where the souls of virtuous pagans, such as Homer and Aristotle, dwell in perpetual melancholy. This concept reflects the Asphodel Meadows, or, in certain respects, the Elysian Fields, reserved for the righteous who could not enter the Christian paradise. The Divine Comedy, therefore, not only combines Christian theology with literature, but also perpetuates the Greek vision of the afterlife, showing how its concepts were transformed and adapted. Influence beyond literature. The Greek vision of the underworld provided a conceptual and visual framework for the development of the Christian hell. The Greek structure of punishment, with a subterranean place for the wicked, a precursor to Tartarus, became a direct model for the Christian hell. The eternity of punishment, like that of Sisyphus or Tantalus, was assimilated into the Christian notion of unending torment. Fire and torment. The Phlegethon, the river of fire that surrounded Tartarus, offered one of the most powerful images of eternal punishment in Greek mythology. This representation was transferred to the Christian hell, described as a lake of fire and brimstone in the Book of Revelation. Last Judgment. In Hades, judges like Minos and Rhadamanthus evaluated the actions of mortals to determine their eternal fate. This concept is clearly analogous to the Christian Last Judgment, where God judges each soul and decides its place in heaven or hell. Thus, Greek mythology provided both the structure and imagery for the Western conception of the afterlife. It is crucial to differentiate between the two concepts. Hades was not a place of pure evil, nor was its figure diabolical. Greek punishment was a matter of fate or human arrogance. The Christian hell, on the other hand, punishes sin against God's will and is ruled by Satan. However, the Greek vision of the underworld gave Christian theology powerful language and imagery to describe the fear and consequences of sin. Its complex geography and hierarchy of punishments helped shape the enduring idea of eternal damnation in Western culture. After influencing religion and literature, its concepts found life in film, video games, and popular culture. In film, Hades and its inhabitants appear reinterpreted. In the animated film Hercules, Hades is a cunning and charismatic villain, quite different from the grim Hades of myth. In more straightforward adaptations, such as the Percy Jackson series, the heroes descend into the underworld, with the field of Asphodel as a gray wasteland and Cerberus as its fearsome guardian. Video games have been especially prolific. In God of War, players battle Cerberus, navigate the river Stygia, and confront the Furies. In Hades, the player controls Sisyphus, Hades' son, attempting to escape the underworld and facing its residents. The game respects the mythology and delves into family relationships and divine motivations. In popular culture, these concepts have become enduring archetypes. The river Styx represents a point of no return. Cerberus is the iconic guardian dog. The Furies symbolize unstoppable vengeance, and Sisyphus's eternal punishment represents futile or repetitive tasks. Thus, the Greek underworld remains alive in the modern imagination, adapted but retaining its symbolic and moral essence. In modern culture, the Greek underworld continues to be a collection of archetypes and symbols that speak of death, fate, punishment, and adventure. It even appears in contemporary references, such as the Venezuelan rapper Canserbero, whose name alludes to the mythical three-headed guardian of the underworld, representing a bridge between reality and human consciousness, exploring themes such as death and existential suffering. After traversing misty rivers, punishments, and heroes, the question arises: why did the Greeks feel both fear and respect for the underworld? The fear was not of a diabolical being, but of the nature of the place itself, the monotony of the Asphodel Meadows, the punishments of Tartarus, and the impossibility of escaping divine justice. At the same time, the Greeks revered the underworld as a place of order and justice. Hades and judges like Minos and Rhadamanthus ensured that crimes would not go unpunished and that virtue would be rewarded. The underworld reflected a cosmic balance. The greatest fear was not dying, but dying without honor. It also offered the promise of the Elysian Fields, a paradise for heroes and the righteous where they could preserve their identity and honor eternally. This realm rewarded human excellence and symbolized the importance of honor, the inevitability of fate, and divine justice, showing why the Greek underworld was both fascinating and terrifying. We have sailed the river of memory, passed through the gates of Tartarus, and rested in the Elysian Fields. Now is the time to reflect on the enduring impact of the Greek underworld. Its legacy extends far beyond ancient myths, shaping our culture and imagination in ways that still define us today. The legacy of Hades is, in essence, the template for our vision of the afterlife. His hierarchy of punishments and rewards was so influential that the Romans adopted it almost verbatim, changing names like Hades and Persephone to Pluto and Proserpina. Literature and religion deepen this influence. Dante, in the Divine Comedy, blends the Greek underworld with Christian theology, creating an archetype of hell that persists to this day. The Greek underworld left us with symbols and archetypes we use unconsciously. The cancerous Virus as an invincible guardian, the task of Sisyphus as a metaphor for futile effort, and crossing the river Styx as reaching a point of no return. Today, video games allow us to face the same monsters as Hercules, and cinema presents us with a modern Hades. These adaptations show that the central themes of the underworld, justice, destiny, love beyond death, and the quest for glory, remain relevant more than 2,000 years later. The story of Hades is one of humanity's earliest great reflections on death, offering lessons about our fears and hopes. With this reflection, the sleepy history journey comes to an end. May you have a peaceful rest.